So g'day and namaste. It's been a little while since I've made a video, and good reason for that. I've been teaching at high school for the last couple of years. It's been very busy, and it also means that when I come home, even on the weekends, I might have creativity as far as ideas go, but not really the energy to produce them. So it's been a dry couple of years, I suppose, as far as my own art making goes. I do enjoy teaching art though. It's really been interesting, and I've learned a lot myself from teaching. And one of the things I want to go over today, just while I show you some of the art that I've been doing recently, mostly in a time-lapse format, just so I can chat through it, is trying to listen to the words that come out of my own mouth, I guess, is the best way to say it. Because quite often I'm giving students advice, and I guess this is true for life. Typically you give people advice that you should be hearing yourself, and you usually don't even hear the words that are coming out of your own mouth. But recently, I guess I've been a little bit more metacognitive or a bit more reflective, and kind of hearing some of what is coming back to me from my own mouth. And so today I just want to have a video where I just chat through some of the issues with making art, particularly drawing, some of the inspirations that I've had recently, and potentially some future directions, let's just say. Okay, we'll go to the drawing now and we'll chat through. So hopefully you're having a good day out there, and I'll see you on the other side. So let's look at the image that inspired it all by the person that kind of got me going again, which is Drawing with Peter, and a little portrait of him. Not because I'm good at portraits, but mostly because I'm not good at portraits, so I don't really like my portraits. So started with a little portrait of him, and then the ink pen exploded everywhere, the fountain pen exploded everywhere. But hope you don't mind, Peter. No offense, but it's just pushing into things I don't usually do. So he had this idea about using little thumbnails, or dividing a page up into just little thumbnail areas and just playing in those little spaces and seeing what happens. Because a lot less pressure on a small space. You know, you can just sort of do a squiggle and it makes something interesting happen. And then if you find something good in a few of those, then you can expand it out. So I really like that idea. And a few of his videos sort of talk about how you get depth in drawing and those sorts of things, like the technicalities of layering different elements and having different planes, I guess, if you're thinking about art in a three-dimensional sense or a perspective sense. This idea of planes and layers moving away from the viewer. The rest of this page has got a little bit of writing on it, just experimenting, I guess, with the pens and the different mediums and the different things I had at hand. So the idea being just making lines and just seeing what happens with them, and just anything that comes to mind, just pushing through it. He had this really great concept that I'll talk about later when I'm looking at the finished drawings, or at least the rest of the drawings that I did. I really just wanted to get hold of a different medium that I haven't used for a long time, particularly a fountain pen, or just pens in general. So I guess we can lead off pretty quickly into one of the problems that I've had with drawing recently, and I think it's something that I've had for a long time. But firstly, just to finish off with Peter Draws and the sort of inspiration that he's given me recently, because I'll leave a link to a YouTube channel, probably even in the description, and just have a look. You know, he does these sort of abstract, meditative kind of drawings where he just starts in a place and just sees where it goes. Great way to draw, and so it's just interesting to listen to him talking about art and those kind of things, and just how he's very sort of kind to himself in a way. Keeps it really simple when he's talking about his own art, and he's very kind to himself and makes a lot of allowances, and it's really interesting just to actually hear him talk about his art. So I highly recommend you go and have a look at it. And he just sort of talks about stuff like trusting yourself and trusting the process, and if a drawing wants to go a particular way, then go a particular way, or if a particular medium wants to do a particular thing, then at least try it and see what happens. So that's kind of where I'm at. And one of the reasons I've always loved and hated drawing ever since I was a kid, and I've been drawing for a very, very long time. It was probably the very first thing that I did artistically ever, was drawing, and I really enjoyed it. But I also really hated making marks. I actually really hated the lines themselves. They could never behave in exactly the way that I wanted to. I was lucky enough to grow up around a lot of really good art, not because my parents are artists, but because they're teachers and because they're missionaries. I think I've talked about this before. Because my parents are missionaries, it meant that I grew up with a lot of French comic books around me because I was born in Vanuatu, so that's was a French colony just up until a year or so, maybe even before I was born. And so many of the missionaries and I guess a lot of the literature lying around that would have been in French when my parents were there. And so I was lucky enough to go around a bunch of sort of French comic books and French artists, kind of like Asterix and Obelix, Tintin. I know that's Dutch, like Herge, but yeah, like that kind of art. Lucky Luke, a lot of sort of bande dessinée type art that I didn't even realize at the time because it was in English, or had been reprinted in English or translated, that it was bande dessinée. I had absolutely no idea. So I actually had quite early exposure to a lot of really great art that I'm just kind of realizing now, given that I'm an Australian, is fairly niche stuff, or stuff. Not that Asterix and Obelix is niche. I mean, that's very, very mainstream, but yeah, it's just kind of funny that I was so highly influenced by the French artists, and my mum had a lot of sort of rock and roll records as well. So and I saw varieties of Mobius's sort of artwork when I was really young, and just that really clean line, sort of comic book cartoony kind of style of art, which is kind of interesting growing up. So, but I always hated my lines, and I never really tried to imitate the style of the illustrators that I really admired. And I guess it's because my parents were teachers. I mean, when I showed an interest in art, they were very supportive. But they would go, "Oh, okay, you like drawing? Well, here's a book by Escher." Well, that's awesome because I love Escher and I love looking at that kind of artwork. But that sort of both influences you and puts something so far beyond you as well. And so I never really liked my lines because I could never get them as fine as he did. Well, that's also too because I never spent weeks or months working on my drawings in the way in which he did, in a meticulous, compulsive kind of way, I guess. And so the very first time I ever did spend a lot of time making art, as far as I can recall, was a drawing that was this sort of city, sort of in an Escher kind of style, but I did it really flat. So I guess, it was very childish and naive. So maybe it looked a little bit medieval in its sort of flatness. But a sort of city that was like maybe like a Borscht painting, almost like a crazy little stalactite that was like a city, like the upside down Tower of Babel or something like that. And there was the first drawing I'd spent a long time on, and I did it in pen and just, I think, felt tip, but a fine line of felt tip, and had all this like hatching and cross hatching in it, and it was the first piece of art that I think my parents ever put in like a frame and put up on the wall. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't the first piece of art. I'm not sure, but it certainly, from memory, was one of the few pieces of mine that made it into a frame because we didn't have a lot of money or a lot of art around the house. But yeah, that made it into a frame. And then I remember one time, like, we had a huge storm and water leaked inside the house and ran down that exact wall, of course, ironically, and yeah, destroyed that drawing, which is kind of funny. But here is the finished result of this page of just playing around. I didn't have the time lapse going the whole time. And this is just, yeah, again, playing with different surfaces, trying to create different sort of surfaces, textures, how you use a pen, and this is all with just a fountain pen that I brought from like an office supply place. And so just experimenting, different shapes and colors, mostly just working with patterns. And sort of trying to figure out the power of lines, because lines are really powerful and can be extremely powerful depending on how you use them. I mean, just the other day in one class, I demonstrated how with 3 or 4 lines, I could create an entire alien, surface of a planet. I guess sort of Mobius style, just like a half circle for a moon and a bit of a cloud and a squiggly line for a landscape or whatever. But, in 3 or 4 decent lines that I controlled the line element in, the actual line element as an art element. When you do it in a controlled manner, you can create an entire universe really, really rapidly. And so there's a great power there. And another thing that I reflect on, I guess it's a little bit philosophic. I don't know, it goes back to that Burroughs book about Naked Lunch, a pretty crazy book. But one of the ideas, there's many ideas in that book, but one of the ideas in there is that the medium itself speaks through with the artist. And so, so a lot of writers use old typewriters and things like that because they write differently, or someone doesn't trust the typewriter, they want to only use a pencil and pen. Here's one of my bad drawings. I started doing a figure drawing, but yeah, it just looks like sausages. And so, yeah, it was just really interesting, this idea. And that sort of bleeds through to art as well. And a lot of people sort of get metaphysical about this and have done for a long time, even go back to a few thousand years ago. Just this idea that the different medium speaks differently. And so that means like I'm, investing in a few different mediums and trying out a few different things and getting a few felt tip pens and just playing with just drawing again and finding those lines and really playing around with the things that I've been teaching about art, and one of those elements being line. And it's all well and good to look at an artist like Hokusai all day and say, oh, look how great these lines are being used. But it's another thing to come home and actually just try it. Take the time to actually just invest in sitting down at a piece of paper and just getting out a pen or a paintbrush, something you don't usually use, and just trying to do something different. Okay, so that went for a bit longer than I thought it was going to, but hopefully it's given you some ideas about where I'm coming from, some thoughts that I've been having recently, and maybe even just some motivation yourself or inspiration yourself to just do the practice, learning any creative ability, whether it's music or whatever. Skateboarding doesn't really matter. Learning any physical and mental activity really comes down to understanding the process and then practicing it. Process plus practice. That's what I say to my students all the time. Just learn the process, then you practice it. And, once you know the rules, you can break them. That's absolutely fine. That's part of practicing, is breaking the rules. Just as I've discussed, so too are the frustrations and the sort of cycle of making art. So it's really important that you don't allow yourself to just be your own worst enemy. Don't get in your own way, okay? And I'm telling myself this, okay? Just sit down, spend a bit of time with it. Doesn't matter what you're making, just spend some time with it, and guaranteed you'll see some improvement. And if you want to see more improvement, then find more processes, find more practices, and bring them into what you're doing. And just rinse and repeat, okay? The more time you spend with something, the better you're going to get. Okay, that's all for me today. Have a lovely day. See you later.